returning those of you that came last week, and we're so sorry that Mr. Scott Newsom was unable to make his presentation because he was ill. He did go into the hospital. He is out of the hospital now, recuperating, hopefully. We send him our well wishes for his certain recovery. I am very appreciative, and I'm very happy to introduce to you the speaker for this evening, Todd Pagliarulo, who is the Vice President of the Sports and Entertainment Group of HERCO. I've known Todd for a long time. He has 29 years of service with Hershey Estates and HERCO. So he was in there with Hershey Estates. He knew my father, and Todd and I graduated from Hershey High School at the Granada School. So, anywho, I will let him give you some more stats about where he is in his career right now. So help me welcome Todd.
First of all, I have to say, Bunny's a lot younger than I am. Just a few comments before I start on the topic of Hershey Park Arena. First of all, Scott Newsom is very sorry that he can't be here tonight, and he's feeling better, but it's going to take a little time. With reference to talking about Hershey, it's so nice to be with a group of people that have the same interests. And with myself personally, I'm not a native. I was not born in the Hershey Hospital. I plan to be buried in the Hershey Cemetery, but it's not a short-term goal. So with that, my family moved out to Hershey in 56, 57. And it's one of these stories in western Pennsylvania where things were really bad. My dad operated a service station, and things just got really depressed. And Hershey opened their arms to not only my parents, but to a whole host of parents and families out of western Pennsylvania that came out. And I grew up in the Milton Hershey School as one of those dreaded house parents' sons at the Dolphin unit for juniors. And graduated from Hershey High School. I had the privilege of working for, and I know I can drop names with this group, the Landis Orchard with Bill Landis. I worked on the farms with Linus Benicle and George Garrison as my farm boss. And this is while I was working my way, or going through high school and also college. I worked a stint at with the Hershey Lumber Company as a stock boy. I also had the opportunity when I was at the farms to work Dutch days, and they would bring us in to do the apple butter for a week, which was great. At that time, I hated it, but now I look back on it, and it's something that I'm very pleased that I had the opportunity to do. I worked as a bellman at the Cocoa Inn at night, and seeing some of our off-ice officials, Randy here and Kim Payne, I could tell you some stories of the hockey players that stayed there from visiting teams on Saturday nights after games, but this is not fitting if I go into those details. But it's sort of unique. Also, I was involved with the Hershey Fire Company, and I see Bill Ginder here. Bill taught me to drive the Mac, the Orange, the old snorkel. You know, I still can't drive them right. Of course, we no longer have them, but Dale was an expert when it came to that. So those are some of the things that in a very brief time that I was able to experience in the town of Hershey. And yes, just like you people, I've seen a lot of changes. If I had anything to do with them when I look back, Starlight Baldwin, my wife and I think we went to the last Dogwood Ball at the Starlight Baldwin. And, you know, if that's something we could bring back, we would do it just like that. But those are the fond memories I have. I served on the Hershey Ambulance Corps. Kay Winrick was the secretary, and she's checking on me and reporting back to make sure I say everything right. Is that right, Kay? All right. But these are the, like I said, the fond memories I have. When I started to work for Hershey, and that was 29 years ago, and looking at some of the people I see here, you know, Al Fittler, Ken Deed, and some of the other individuals here, and Dale, there's a vast history there. And I really didn't realize some of the people, and as Ronnie pointed out, meeting her father, Bob Payne, these are legends in this community. And, you know, now I wish I would have taken time to got to know these people a lot better. But when I talk about the Hershey Arena here in a second, this is it runs from a technical presentation to a very general presentation. It is long, but there's a lot of information there. And as Kim pointed out to me, if I made any mistake on the dates, please feel free to point them out to me, all right? And this is a presentation that I can stop at any time. Any questions at all, ask them. If you have any memories that pop in your mind, bring them out, because this is a learning situation for all of us. So with that, I'm going to just start on this presentation. And Ed King is working the PowerPoint for me, so he's the one who's going to make me look good here. Of the many things that always drew me to the company in this town was the powerful story of caring, vision, and philanthropy that Milton S. Hershey brought to the area. Throughout his life, Mr. Hershey was able to preserve through difficult times while growing his company, school, and this magnificent town of Hershey. Of the many outstanding buildings that Milton Hershey erected, the Hershey Park Arena, formerly the Hershey Sports Arena, ranks as one of the most significant. Imagine putting a roof over a space almost as large as 2 football fields, with a thin shell of concrete only 3 1/2 inches thick. This was the problem that was placed before the designers of the Hershey Sports Arena. There could be no columns or open structure work. It was to be magnificently simple in appearance. The only solution was a monolithic structure formed by a huge arch raising 100 feet from the floor of the ceiling. Now remember, I'm going to give you guys a test at the end, so it's going to be fast. The arena was the first large-scale barrel shelf roof in the United States, establishing a precedent for a series of such structures over the next 2 decades. E. Paul Whitmer designed the building, and Anton Tedesco designed the shell roof. Both men took personal and full charge of the arena's construction. Because of the success of the barrel roof, Anton Tedesco went on to become the leading thin-shell engineer in the United States. He subsequently received practically every major award available to structural engineers. The arena was so well designed and built that it remained in exceptional sound condition at the start of the 21st century. And it still exhibits all of the design features, including its stunning image inside and its powerful impression from the outside. All of these factors made the Hershey Arena a prime candidate for designation as a National Historical Landmark, a designation truly deserved after providing 65 years of outstanding service. Now, talking about the Depression years and the development of the Hershey Sports Arena. By the time the Great Depression hit in 1930, M.S. Hershey had already established tree-lined streets with a beautiful single-family homes instead of the traditional row houses, a trolley system connecting Hershey attractions and outlying towns, an amusement park with a ballroom and a band shell, a zoo, a public library, a convention hall, a hospital, a golf club, and a community swimming pool. Mr. Hershey was determined that the town of Hershey would escape the grasp of this trying time. And Miss Hershey is said to have told fellow managers over lunch one day, "Gentlemen, we are told we are having a depression in this country and unemployment. I have brought about 600 workmen to this town engaged in a building operation. Therefore, I have made up my mind that since building materials are now at the lowest cost level, I'm going to build a community building, a hotel, a school, and so as to take care of my people." The Depression provided Hershey with a sizable labor force of workers to carry out his large-scale building plans. He was able to build at the lowest possible cost while helping the local economy and maintaining full employment. On the other hand, construction photos of building projects show a large number of automobiles parked adjacent to the site, indicating that Mr. Hershey must have paid a wage commensurate with skilled labor. People in this town today still reflect on that era with a sincere pride, and there was no depression in our community. One man, Mr. D. Paul Whitmer, began to assume more and more responsibility of the construction management of these projects. Whitmer originally was a house builder in the late 20s for Mr. Hershey's planned community. In 1930, Mr. Whitmer had progressed to manager of the convention hall, which became the Ice Palace and served as the original ice arena for the newly formed amateur hockey team, the Hershey Bars. Hershey's interest in hockey began back in 1931 when the game was introduced to provide a use for convention hall, which is now the Hershey Museum. In the winter season, an ice plant and a rink 60 by 170 was installed. The Swarthmore Hockey Club began playing their games in Hershey on February 17, 1931. And by the end of the season, the game had caught on so well that the Ice Palace was remodeled to provide a larger ice service, and hosting hockey games became the building's primary function. When the 1932-33 season rolled around, Hershey had its own club as a member of the newly formed Tri-State League and competed against teams from Baltimore, Atlantic City, and Philadelphia. Large crowds, particularly those drawn by New York and Pittsburgh games, jammed the old Ice Palace so heavily that on several occasions, hundreds of people were turned away due to lack of space. It appeared that Hershey was in love with skating. The ice carnival completely sold out 2 weeks in advance, and hundreds more were turned away each night. Milton Hershey was an avid fan who always paid for his game tickets. When he was unable to attend one evening because the game was sold out, he vowed to his driver that he'd build a new arena with room for everyone. So Mr. Hershey had D. Paul Whitmer solicit plans for a new, larger building. According to Brett Hancock, and of course, Randy and Tim, we saw Brett last night at the hockey game. According to Brett Hancock, the Bears publicist from 1935 to 82, D. Paul Whitmer relayed to him many years after the arena was complete that he tried to tell Mr. Hershey on more than one occasion that the new arena should be built out where the stadium is now situated. To that, Mr. Hershey said, "Well, it's pretty far from our ice-making equipment." Whitmer replied, "Mr. Hershey, we can run 2 lines of brine through and right out there, no problem." But Mr. Whitmer said, "We couldn't convince the boss." Mr. Hershey's final answer was that, "Better put it right where it is." And you know, when I hear that, we couldn't convince the boss, to me, there's a respect for Mr. Hershey, as we all know. He was in charge, and he was the boss. The design of the Hershey Sports Arena. By 1935, D. Paul Whitmer met Anton Tedesco, who were representatives of the Portland Cement Company. The 32-year-old Tedesco kept at a chance to design the largest monolithic concrete roof structure in North America. There was no precedent for such a structure, no design codes, no established construction practices. The project of this scale requiring such careful tolerances. On January 21, 1936, Tedesco presented his idea of a huge stadium to D. Paul Whitmer, who in turn presented it to Mr. Hershey. When Mr. Hershey saw that the plan called for a roof being made entirely of reinforced concrete, he was hesitant. Fearing the roof would cave in, Mr. Hershey is said to have commented, "I was somehow startled when Whitmer showed me the plans, for I hadn't figured building such a large structure, and I had to think twice before I let him go ahead with its construction." But Mr. Whitmer finally got his way, explaining that it would be just as strong as a lot of bridges when it was all put together. The roof couldn't fall in, Whitmer said, and Hershey, with his love for new ideas, was persuaded. Tedesco hired a staff in Chicago, and the design work started immediately. On February 7th, he began to write out in detail the full calculations for the roof structure. Fortunately, the design manuscript had been preserved and is housed in the Princeton Billiard Archives. It is interesting to note that the concrete will not stand for much pulling or bending strength, but it will stand for unbelievable amounts of weight pushing down upon it. The concrete used in the sports arena will stand more than 4,000 pounds of pressure per square inch. It is on this principle that the building was built. Finding the different pressures on the building must have been no easy task, for it is said that Tedesco filled 300 full-size sheets of papers with figures, and he calculated the stresses on the concrete. And if I just may add that Dr. I'm not too sure to pronounce his last name, Callis from Lafayette had given a presentation at the Hershey Museum, and he and his assistant went through his 300 pages of calculations with a computer and found out they were totally correct. Mr. Tedesco must have been a genius when it came to structural engineering. Now, the construction of the new arena. Tedesco completed his design and analysis by February 28th. And if you remember, it started in January, now it's February, and he had the design. And the ground was broken on March 11th to begin work. And almost before the hockey team had finished traveling the season, the construction for the project lasted 8 months. As previously stated, the most remarkable feature of the arena was its arched roof, which rests on a series of hinges, where the total weight is brought down to 1 point. The hinge is not supported on concrete as might be assumed, but at first glance, but rests on a lead plate. The hinge and lead plate were necessary in order to prevent cracking in the structure that would otherwise occur when the concrete expanded and contracted with the heat and cold. If I just may point out, I believe that metal plate was in right here because I believe this is the actual arch that would be going up this way. And of course, if you look at the buttresses that are there to support this. And today, I just took time to walk around the arena. Working at that place for 10 years, or in the facility for 10 years, I took a lot of that for granted. And if you have an opportunity just to walk around and see the amount of concrete that was placed in that, and the aesthetics that add towards something else. I also took an opportunity to walk down into the bowels of the arena. My buddy Ken Deven has been down there quite a bit and been around there. And going back underneath the dirt area, it's just phenomenal to see the work and the craftsmanship that went into that building of that arena. But again, it just sort of put me in the mood for this presentation. If the concrete was anchored rigidly, engineering principles held that something would crack or break and the structure would collapse. Using a German patent, Tedesco put a slab of lead an inch thick at the base of the ribs. These hinges moved ever so slightly with the temperature change. The height of the building can fluctuate more than an inch at extremes of temperatures. The roof structure was built in 5 individual sections. Between every 2 sections of the roof was placed an expansion joint, which allowed the concrete to expand and contract in several directions. After the foundation was dug, a wooden form was built. This form not only had to be as high as the finished structure and be able to stand the weight of the concrete, but also had to be lowered and moved to the next section. In order to do this, tracks were laid and more than 200 building jacks were placed under the form. Then the concrete pour began. Day and night it continued, for once it started, as in all concrete work, it could not stop. Steel reinforcement was put in place. Great care was taken that each side was built at the same speed. For if one side became heavier than the other, the form would collapse and under the unequal weight. And just to point out, when these buildings were built in Germany, the construction workers were used to doing this type of work. When Tedesco came to the United States and MS Hershey brought in these workers, they were not. So they had to be trained. And towards the end of the project, they became so skilled that they started to compete with each other in order to get the ribs in and get them done. And again, I thought that was an interesting point. Slowly but surely, the first section took shape until the 2 arcs met at the top, forming the complete arch. When the concrete had set, the ticklish job of removing the form was started. At first, the jacks were moved, just as part of the turn, beginning them down a fraction of an inch. Again, the jacks were turned and the form came down slightly. The operation was continued until the arch stood by itself. After this, the form was placed and moved to the site of the next section, and the pouring of concrete, placing of reinforcement, and a host of other operations started all over again. For 5 segments, this process was carried out, until finally the shell was complete. When the final section of the concrete was poured, the weather was very cold, posing a problem for designers, Tedesco and Whitmer. But they poured the concrete anyway and came up with a very innovative solution, and I'm sure we all heard about this. They poured all the horse manure and straw they could find in the area and placed it on the newly poured concrete. It worked, it keep the concrete worn enough to set. And obviously, when you're in the chocolate business, in the dairy business, you had quite access to a lot of porcelain at that time. Bleachers were entirely separate from the building. When each section of bleachers were in place, steam fitters started installation of heating and plumbing and vacuum cleaning systems. These, together with all other trades, created a parade from one end of the building to the other. Thus, when the last section of roof was placed on in November 17, the interior was at least 85% complete. The construction materials ran into a tremendous quality, including 210 carloads of stands, 25,000 barrels of cement, 96 tons of concrete. It just goes on and on and on. The formwork for the huge arch ribs was made up of a patchwork of standard lumber sizes secured by Whitmer. Since Mr. Hershey stipulated that all lumber associated with the project later be used in construction of barns and homes in Hershey. And I know some of you people, Hal Sittler and who's worked at the park, dealing in concrete, he likes to use large wooden boards because it's easier to handle that concrete. But M.S. Hershey, being the innovator and the exactness to detail, wanted it to be used so that it could be recycled for the homes and barns in Hershey. And the biggest number of all was the final piece of the project, which came in under $1 million. Grand opening. The grand opening festivities in 1936 included a hockey game between the Hershey Bars, later renamed the Bears, and the New York Rovers, and an exhibition of fancy skating and ice acrobatics. Here you see the actual telegram that Antone Tedesco sent to D. Paul Whitmer on the opening night, which reads in part, "Just out of bed with the grip or grip? Grip. Obviously, I have not had that yet. I'm extremely sorry that I cannot be with you this evening when our baby will be christened. Hello to all the boys and wish victory to Hershey. Special trains from New York and Allentown brought hockey fans that filled the new arena. Reporters from all over New York City attended. Al Lancy, writing in the New York Herald Tribune and describing the new arena, wrote, the visitors saw what looked from a distance like a dirigible hangar. But once inside, they were convinced that it deserved the title of finest hockey rink, which builders claimed for it." Thomas J. Deegan wrote in the New York Times, "The new imagination Hershey Arena officially was open tonight amid ceremonies adequately befitting the capacity of the house looking on. Behind all the glamour of the opening night lay the story of the building of the newest of sports structures, a story which goes back some 7 months. This new arena fulfills the fondest dreams of the sponsor of the entire M.S. Hershey community, who fortunately was unable to attend because he was suffering from a cold." Just a comment, with the opening night festivities and the time it took to build the building, it was done in less than a year. The new arena that we're building, which obviously is a little larger, but at the same time, it took 2 years to build. It took another year to design, and who knows the squabbling that's going to go on after the building is built between the architect, the designer, the attorney, and the owner. And there was none of it. This building was built in a streamlined fashion, the best that can be built at the time. Moving on to the operation of the Hershey Sports Arena. Of course, the primary tenant of the new facility in 1936 was the Hershey Bars. At the time, season tickets for the 25 regular scheduled Eastern Amateur Hockey League games were offered for a total of $7.10. Regular cost per seat was $1.14. $3.55 season ticket plan was available for the 86-cent seat. Quite a bargain at the time. With the new arena, the fine facilities, and the Hershey's love affair with hockey, at the start of the 1936 season, the Bars were officially renamed the Hershey Bears because the New York sports writers in the Eastern Amateur League felt the name Hershey Bars was too commercial. The name of the Bears originated from the team being referred to as the Bears from Penn's Woods when the team played at Madison Square Garden. Hershey took a big jump at the beginning of the 1938-39 season into pro hockey. That season, Coach Herb Mitchell was selected to coach a team for the 2-year International Hockey League.
The league was renamed the American League the 1941-42 season. The American Hockey League was quite a bit different then. In those days, there were only 6 teams, and the NHL had 11 teams in the American Hockey League. I believe now in the American Hockey League we have 27 teams. And for those who think that the crowd interaction in hockey games is a modern invention, Bob Payne, who was the director of operations for the arena, could have told you differently. One of the most vivid memories of the arena involved, of all things, soap. He told the story. It was about 1939, and I was an usher. And Mr. Hershey was going into the soap business. Cocoa butter soap, he called it, Payne said. That night, everybody who came into the arena for the hockey game got a cake of soap. The place was at capacity, more than 7,200 people. Somewhere in the game, there was a bad call by the ref, and I think there were 7,200 cakes of soap thrown at them. You could see the goaltender hiding under the net. A subsequent count of the soap samples retrieved from the arena showed that the official decision was an unpopular, with some 4,200 bars of soap removed from the ice. No comment on what the way the Bears are playing now. The Hershey Bears have claimed the Calder Cup 8 times in their illustrious existence. The winning tradition started that when they cinched the Eastern Amateur League Championship in 35 and 36, 36-37, and concluded their last year in the amateurs by winning the 37-38 National Amateur Championship. Winning continued in the American Hockey League when the Bears won 3 regular season division titles and pressed on to the playoffs every season between 38-39 and 45-46.
Todd?
Yes?
Excuse me, you might want to point out that's Bunny's dad next to the
Oh,
man
yes.
in the blue jacket.
And looking at that, you can see Dr. B, Dr. Backenstoes, and that's Mr. White. Mr. White. And Frank Mathers, the tall person. Oh, it's Scotty, our trainer, off to the right there. And who else is that? Was Ralph Keller on that team? Yeah. Is there Ralph on the side there?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Bobby Trenton is the other trainer up in top there. He was in, I think Bobby was still in high school at that time. Any other questions on it? Anybody here that picture? Well, with that, they successfully clinched Calder Cup titles under the coaching of Don Pedersen in 46-47, Frank Mathers 57-58, 58-59, 68-69, Chuck Hamilton in 73-74, Doug Gibson in 70 and 80, John Paddock in 87 and 88, and most recently, Bob Hartley in 96 and 97. Frank Mathers will tell you the interesting story out when he came to Hershey. And I haven't talked to Frank about this, but he wasn't at the game, at least I didn't see him last night, but I do want to check this. And the story goes on as he tells it. It was spring of 1956, and John B. Sullenberger was president of the Hershey States at the time. He was brought in as a player coach. He was 31 at the time and figured it's time to, as he said, get a real job. The only problem was that he didn't really have any intentions to be either a coach or a Hershey resident. However, Mr. Sullenberger phoned and began to persuade that he started to work his magic on Frank. And even after Frank told him that he wasn't interested in the job, J.B. said, just come on down. Just stay at the hotel. Bring your wife down. Frank and his wife did come down to Hershey, and John treated him very well and gave him a car and carte blanche around Hershey. As J.B. said, just tell him, you know me, and sign the check. Can you imagine that happens now? That was a real company town then. I love that. The problem was that as a player for Pittsburgh, Frank had never grown fond of his visits to Hershey. In fact, he described the high point of those early visits as being to walk from the Cocoa Inn to the arena because he could feed the cart from Spring Creek. Not terribly exciting for a young man, even back in those days, so he needed some added convincing. The added convincing came in the form of a roller coaster ride in the park. J.B. Sullenberger sat in the front seat with his wife, and Pat and Frank and his sat in the rear behind them. And around they went on the track. Frank says 12 times, although Pat said it was more like 3, until Frank agreed to come to Hershey. All described as the smartest move he ever made. Let's take a moment to look at some of the historic arena events. Hockey wasn't the only draw of the sports arena throughout its history. The venue played host to its share of entertainment, provided the world-class facilities for community use, and witnessed history in the making on more than one occasion. Milton Hershey spent both of his 80 and 81 birthday there. For his 80th birthday on September 13, 1937, organizers thought that they would surprise him with a celebration at the arena. Roy Tice picked us up and picked Mr. Hershey up under the guise of taking him to a private affair with only his friends there. Upon reaching the arena, he was serenaded with "For He's a Jolly Good Fellow" and "Happy Birthday" by thousands of well-wishers. It was quite an evening, and virtually everyone thought they had surprised him. They had, and yet they hadn't. Well, he somehow got word of the event. In his pocket, he carried a speech he had worked on for over a week, many times. He wasn't prepared for the big, beautiful ring that he was given. The ring had 18 blue-white diamonds and a trademark of the child emerging from the cocoa pot. The party featured a giant orchestra comprised of local bands, the Milton S. Hershey Boys Marching Band, the dais covered with flowers. In addition, there was a 3-foot high cake that measured nearly 12 feet wide. 80 big candles placed on the cake radiated light and made it for a startling centerpiece in the arena. Milton Hershey wasn't the only big dignitary to celebrate a birthday in the arena. Pennsylvania's great general and president, Dwight D. Eisenhower, celebrated his 63rd birthday on October 13, 1953. The famous conductor Fred Waring and the Pennsylvanians, the chorus made up of Pennsylvanians recruited from all over the state, formed the nucleus of the celebration, at which there were over 500 actors or performers. Dalton County Republican Committee rented the Ringling Brothers tent out of Sarasota, Florida, and erected it on the old practice field, which is located just east of the driveway coming into the employees' entrance to the park. The event featured all sorts of activities and celebrities. In fact, as part of the event, Ben Hogan was in the stadium knocking golf balls from the south end by the ticket window right out of the north end of the stadium. And there were plenty of accommodations made for the President and the First Lady. In fact, they made one of the figure skating dressing rooms into a dressing room for Mamie Eisenhower, enclosed the toilet, and carpeted the floor and draped the walls to make it look like her living room. The community was also heavily involved in the arena. The employee Christmas party was held in the arena from 1949 through 1952. They were open to both Hershey Chocolate Corporation and Hershey Estates employees and their families. It was an event which featured big-name entertainment. There included actually 2 events held to accommodate all people. Headliner acts included the Horace Heidig Show, a variety show host, Tommy Clark, a child performer, Ralph Sigwalt, a baritone, Frankie Carley, Patty Page, the 5 DeMarco sisters, Jerry Colonna, Joey Adams, Joe E. Brown, Lawrence Menquire, a great tenor, an opera singer, and it just ran the gamut of the people that he brought in. Founders Day event started in 1953, was also held in the arena. The original event was part of the town's 50th anniversary, celebrating that has continued routinely ever since to celebrate and promote the town's heritage. The Hershey Skating Club, organized in 1929, helped popularize public skating. The club moved their skating and ice carnival event to the arena in 1937. Mr. Hershey was very interested in promoting skating. He offered the ice to the skating club free of charge for several years and went so far as to bring in big-name skaters to help increase interest in the sport. Even Sonia Henning, who was very popular at the time, came to Hershey and skated between periods of the hockey game. Speaking of skating, the famous ice capades got their start right here in Hershey. A group of arena owners gathered at the Hotel Hershey on Valentine's Day 1940 to discuss the forming of the ice show to play in their buildings during the 1940-41 season. Again, Hershey's John B. Sullenberger was among the group of Arena Managers Association members who convinced the ice skating excitement of the ice capades. Walter Brown, after thinking about potential names, said, "Well, this is an escapade on ice, isn't it? Let's call it Ice Capade." In these pictures you see Donna Atwood, who was a famous Ice Capade star who married John Harris, who went on to head Ice Capade. A very popular event was the Baby Parade, which was started in 1936 and continued until 1973. There were different categories that parents could enter their children in, such as the best costume, best float, and cutest baby. For the 25th anniversary of the Baby Parade, the previous winners were asked to come back to the arena. Including in those who returned was one past female winner that had gone on to become Miss America. A wide variety of other family shows had come and gone in the arena. Events such as the famous Moscow Circus, an acrobatic diving show that featured full-size swimming pools in the center of the arena, and always the entertaining clown prince of basketball, the Harlem Globetrotters, who drew over 9,000 people, standing room only one year. Now, from what I understand, there are very few people in the town of Hershey that didn't personally witness Wilton Chamberlain representing the game of March 2nd, 1962. Hey, Kim, I think you and I were there too, weren't we? Bob Payne remembered when Chamberlain did the impossible while playing for then the Philadelphia Warriors against the New York Knicks. As he recalls, I was working in the Park box office and sat in the press box, and a reporter said, "I think we will see history tonight." He asked me to keep the total points Wilt scored. They kept announcing, Wilt has 85, he has 90. People I talked to today, everybody had seen the game, just like everyone saw Babe Ruth's 60th home run. There were only 4,400 people in the basketball game that night. Even though the arena isn't the biggest building that entertainers play during the course of the year, a lot of entertainers still very much like to come to Hershey because of its beauty and its special treatment that they get in Hershey. Liberace is performed, who had an excellent relationship with not only Liberace himself, but with his manager. Seymour Heller, too, who incidentally didn't trust to sell programs or merchandise to anyone but himself, who was lead manager. The arena used to play Liberace over twice a year for about 6 performances each time. Liberace's special relationship with Mom Gordon is another reason he kept coming back year after year. One year he wanted Liberace to come back to Hershey, and Seymour Heller said, "Well, I think it's too soon to play Liberace again." Cy Little, and I know a lot of you people, and Hal Sidler knows and remembers Cy, who was our director of entertainment at the time, told Seymour, "Mom Gordon is going to cook the special baked beans and pepper slaw for Lee when he comes in. You make sure that you tell him that." And sure as rain, he came back specifically for Mom Gordon's baked beans and pepper slaw. And that is the truth. I think we all remember that day in 1979, and at least I remember that day in 1979, when we learned more than we ever wanted to know about nuclear power. The nuclear mishap at 3 Mile Island, located 15 miles from Hershey, brought a call from the governor's office to our company. Because of our location and our concrete arena, the governor said, "We'd like to use the arena for evacuees." At the time, the hockey club was practicing, and I also know we had scheduled a major event that weekend, concert event. We picked the hockey team off the ice, put down the floor of the ice, stocked all the restrooms, had people in the refreshment stand, just so evacuees could get a drink of water or whatever they needed at that time. We weren't sure how many people might be coming our way, 1,500 or 15,000, but we had to go in ready in an hour. We ended up with 186 people, but we were ready. We even had the medical center over and had the ability to deliver babies, because the pregnant ladies and preschool children were basically the ones that were being told to evacuate. What about about the arena today. After 65 years of service, the arena has remained competitive with other major buildings in the country. Since the arena opened, a full-time staff had specific duty of maintaining the building. The maintenance staff is instrumental in a quick change of the arena. For non-ice events such as concerts, a board floor is laid in a matter of 4 hours directly on the ice surface. The 3 large lighter that are suspended from the arena's ceiling are the original light structures, each 23 feet in diameter. The 48 original spotlights have been replaced with a 1,000-watt mercury vapor that increased lighting by 60%. Many major improvements were made during the 70s, 80s, and 90s. New sound system in the arena, new seats, additional public space, and new refrigeration for the floor. A $30,000 maple wood basketball floor built by Cincinnati Floor Company of Ohio was purchased and added to the operation. Safety has always been a primary concern for the Hershey Park Arena. A steel bridge system was added beneath the roof of the arena to establish rigging points to better support the heavier modern sound system backdrop and projection screen. So in conclusion, the Hershey Park Arena has glittered with every phase of show business and showcased the finest offerings of the world of sports. And now, in its second half century, this historic monolithic masterpiece of central Pennsylvania continues to bustle with year-round activity and remains competitive with many more recent buildings. In 1998, Hershey Park Arena was ranked 7th, and in all the facilities having 5,001 to 10,000 seats, as ranked by amusement business. This year, Hershey Park Arena also broke 9 facility records. In the year 2000, Hershey Park Arena ranked 4th, having between 5,000 and 10,000 seats with the amusement business. Aside from being the home for the Hershey Bears, Hershey Park continues to play host to a variety of events such as Champions on Ice, family shows such as Sesame's Live, music concerts, and always the exciting WWF, which will be back here on Sunday if anybody's interested. After 65 years of sports and in the sports and entertainment business, Hershey Park Arena stands today as a tribute to the philanthropy and ingenuity of the chocolate king, Milton S. Hershey. He was a progressive thinker who was a legend in his own time, using his wealth for the good of others. In the Hershey Park Arena, he created a building that was unique to all the world that, like Milton S. Hershey, has transcended time. Thank you very much, and if you have any questions, please. What's that? The historic Hershey Park Arena, we are going to use both structures. The Giant Center will enable us, obviously, to bring in larger concerts, larger ice shows. But because of the added emphasis that has been placed on hockey, Scholastic, Lebanon Valley, need for ice time, high school hockey, PIAA, team wrestling. There are a lot of groups that are looking for smaller venues, not as large as the Giant Center, but something that has the size that the existing Hershey Park Arena had, and we can utilize that structure. We're not going to compete against each other, but that structure is very vital to our company's plans, and with that additional ice that we have there, it's going to be an asset to not only the community of Hershey, but the Central Pennsylvania area. Yes.
Todd, one comment about the Eastern Amateur Hockey League. They weren't amateurs. As Bunny well knows, her dad got paid when he was playing for the Amateur Hockey League.
Well, that's good. That's
The league's name was derived really from the National Hockey League that insisted the word amateur be put in there to delineate or differentiate, I should say, from the professionals who were in the National Hockey League.
That's a good point. Did they get paid, what, $1 million apiece? Or?
That's not good.
Good point.
I don't know what Bonnie's dad was paid, but I know that
Are there any other questions?
Is there an area under the floor?
It goes around, and Ken, if you want to help me on this, there's the pipes that run through, and you can go down where the ammonium is located, the ammonium piping and compressors, and you can see the piping that goes through the floors, and actually you can walk down underneath part of the concrete floor around the facility where the brine pipes run. Am I correct on that?
Where the ground peaks are, peaks right off the floor. So the tunnel already done, all the way around.
Yeah, it's sort of interesting. If anybody would be interested in looking and seeing behind there, we would gladly make arrangements for anybody to go down there and take a look. It's sort of interesting to see that. And I look at Ken or Harold Sidler, that the compressors that we have down there are the original compressors. Am I correct on that?
No, not, some of them are, but we replaced two of them.
Replaced two of them.
True, they're old 15 compressors, and there's two down there that are from the original ice house. We still running.
Still running. That's amazing. That's, and
They're old 30.
well, there's the brick compressors.
Right, yeah.
Brick compressors, phenomenal workmanship.
You need store. What do you need store?
We would gladly make arrangements with that. Are there any other questions? If not, I'll turn it back to my friend Bunny.
Well, sorry, this is my second home. And it brings back a lot of memories. Thank you, Ed, for your, the sticker there.
Excellent.
Todd, I thank you very much. Wonderful presentation. Just very well documented. And thank you, Bud, for your input there. Just a small token of our appreciation.
I can always use this. I'll split it with video.
Thank you so much. One other thing. I would like to present to Todd, who we're so sorry that he couldn't be with us, a block. Now, this is our newest block of the arena that we'd like to give to Mr. Newsom when it comes in. It's not here yet, but as soon as it is in, I will make the presentation. I'll bring it over and answer it. But I want you to give this here to Tom. Thank you so much for, and okay.
And I'd like to make a presentation to Kathy.
Yes, I would like to have Kathy come up, except Todd, like to do that.
And as part of our history of the company, our Hershey Wildcat, which obviously we had to discontinue the franchise, but was an important part of fabric for 5 years of our company that in the last year they were runners-up to the championship. And this part of history we would like to present to the Historical Society of the County. All right? You're welcome.
Perfect.
Okay, I next program then.
Can't hear you, Kathy.
Can't hear me.
Not that we understand you.
Now, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, I was just saying what a wonderful program this was. I enjoyed it very much, and I certainly hope all of you did. It does bring back a lot of memories of being at the arena for various activities. I just want to get ready for the raffle. There's some people who are still interested in buying tickets to a raffle. It's $2 for 1 or 3 for 5. And I think you have the list of prizes. The first one is the Hotel Hershey circular dining room brush for 2. $50, not 25. Blockbuster video rental, around $15. Mrs. Cafe gift certificate for $20, and Dom's here, fish dinner, chicken dinner, or cheesesteak dinner, value of $15.
That's the whole package. Sorry? I just wanted to remind everyone about our next month's program. Richard Williams from the Hershey Garden and Butterfly House will be doing a program about the amazing monarch butterfly, and so that'll be a really neat and interesting program too. So please come back. Okay, anyone else want to take it?
Anybody else want to take it? I just everyone who